The Pineys, Coach of the Year, presented by Stifel, the Founders Group.
Welcome back to the North Carolina Sports Awards, the Pineys, here on the North Carolina Sports Network. It's all brought to you by our foundational partner, NC Pork. It's good for the plate and great for the state. Over $11.6 billion of annual economic impact and over 46,000 jobs. The pork industry, certainly the backbone of this bold North State economy. And DG, this Coach of the Year field is certainly loaded as well.
No doubt about it, Mike. When you look at these names and what they accomplished this past year, it is a who's who of coaching excellence in the state of North Carolina and beyond. Picking just one winner for any of us, that was no easy task.
No easy task, but the first nominee is the first ever guest on the North Carolina Sports Network, the head coach of the Canes, Rod the Bod Brindamore. DG, Rod keeps finding ways to elevate this franchise. What stood out for the Canes this season?
Yeah, well, Rod Brindamore led the Canes to the Stanley Cup Finals again, and along the way, he became the fastest head coach in NHL history to reach 300 victories. He's not just a great motivator, he's an elite culture builder, and he's as universally respected as anyone in the entire National Hockey League.
Over at Wallace Wade Stadium, Manny Diaz, in his first season as the Blue Devils head coach, notched a 9-win season. That is rare air in Durham, and it turned some heads.
Absolutely. Duke went 9-4 in 2024. That was tied for the second most wins in program history in Manny's first year, obviously. And remember, he took over after Mike Elko's departure. He was hired after the transfer portal had opened, and nevertheless, he still managed to keep the Duke football train rolling. His defense was particularly superb. The culture was right, and Manny and his staff made a huge, positive, immediate impact in Durham.
College football in North Carolina was really strong last year, depth across the board. None better than Johnson C. Smith out of the CIAA. Maurice Flowers is their head coach. And last year, the Golden Bulls got off to a really strong 8-0 start. And that got people talking for the first time in decades about Johnson C. Smith football.
It sure did, Mike. First 8-0 start in program history, and the Golden Bulls climbed higher in the Division II national rankings last fall than ever in the history of their program. Coach Maurice Flowers has revitalized what had been a previously downtrodden program for quite a while. It was one of the best feel-good stories in all of North Carolina football last year, really at any level, and obviously a real source of pride for that university and that HBCU program.
Speaking of breakthroughs, how about Alan Huss and the High Point Panthers men's basketball program?
Yeah, we mentioned earlier the Panthers went 29-6, won the Big South Championship, and made that first ever NCAA tournament appearance as a Division I program. Coach Huss actually recently left to take a job at his alma mater, Creighton, with the idea that he'll be the Blue Jays head coach in the not-too-distant future, and obviously we wish him well there. But before he left, he took the High Point program to places it truly had never been before, and I mean both literally and figuratively.
Now over to Chapel Hill, where Jenny Levy continues to set the standard in women's lacrosse. David, this might have been her best year yet.
Yeah, we saw Coach Levy earlier, and we encourage folks to check out that longer form interview. But in her entire highly decorated 30-year career at this point, this is about as good as it gets. It was a perfect 22-0 season, ACC champs, national title for the UNC women's lacrosse team, and obviously it was our Team of the Year honor here at the North Carolina Sports Network. I'm not sure we let the same people win Team of the Year and Coach of the Year, but she was the ACC Coach of the Year, and get this, she's going to be inducted later this calendar year into the IWLCA Hall of Fame. She hasn't just built a dynasty, she has cemented a truly legendary legacy in Chapel Hill.
Over on the soccer pitch, NC State graduate Damon Nahas took over the reins for North Carolina women's soccer, and all he did in his first season, DG, was win a national championship.
Yeah, all he did, right? He follows Anson Dorrance, a legend, and doesn't miss a beat. The Tar Heels won the 2024 NCAA title, and Nahas guided the program with poise and purpose from the beginning. He was the first-year interim head coach as he won the national title, and that obviously led UNC to remove that interim label. That right there says it all.
Finally, it's the Final Four head coach from Duke basketball, Jon Scheyer. He was handed the keys to a basketball empire from Coach Mike Krzyzewski, and he's driving it now like a pro.
Yeah, 35 wins and only 4 losses, ACC champion, trip to the Final Four. That actually earned Jon Scheyer some of the National Coach of the Year honors in 2025. It is not easy following any legend, much less Coach K, but Jon Scheyer has found a way to honor that legacy while forging his own. It's only 3 years into his tenure at this point, and he already has essentially everything except a national championship on his coaching resume. That is incredible.
Man, this Coach of the Year category is absolutely packed with talent, some young talent at that. But as impressive as each of these nominees is, there can only be one winner of the Pineys. And the 2025 North Carolina Sports Awards Coach of the Year, as voted on by our statewide fans and panel of experts, is Tony Bresky, a 2-time national championship head coach of Wake Forest men's tennis.
Yeah, Mike, and we mentioned it earlier. What a season. 40-1 overall, 33-0 in the regular season, ACC Coach of the Year, and most importantly for these purposes, the 2025 NCAA champion. Coach Bresky has built an absolute juggernaut in Winston-Salem. His team was dominant, disciplined, and nearly perfect in the end. And what makes it more impressive, he achieved it in a sport where national championship team titles are scarce. Wake Forest was simply the best, as that old song goes, and Tony Bresky deserves every ounce of this honor. Okay, without further ado, it is time to welcome in the winner of one of our 2024-25 North Carolina Sports Awards categories that received the most input from sports fans across North Carolina and beyond. Our top vote getters for the statewide Coach of the Year honor included Carolina Hurricanes hockey coach Rod Brindamore from the professional ranks, and both Duke men's basketball coach Jon Scheyer and UNC women's lacrosse coach Jenny Levy from the major college level. There also were a lot of votes for a lot of successful leaders from other rungs in the NCAA ladder, including Johnson C. Smith football coach Maurice Flowers, who led that Division II program to its highest national ranking in school history. Our 2024-25 Coach of the Year winner, though, was both a 2025 national champion with his team and his sport's 2025 National Coach of the Year. And he has a very interesting life journey that we hope to explore a bit with him as well. Wake Forest men's tennis coach Tony Bresky grew up in Canada, didn't start playing tennis until he was 13 years old, but he fell in love with the sport and ultimately became a star player at Western Illinois University, a school that inducted him into its Athletics Hall of Fame back in 2015. After college graduation and a brief professional tennis career, he earned an MBA degree and initially worked in the finance world, but he quickly returned to tennis, first as a private coach in the greater New York City area, then as an associate head coach who helped build the Virginia Cavaliers into a national power. He became a head coach for the first time in 2010 at Cornell University, which he led to the best season in that program's history. When Wake Forest hired Coach Bresky in 2011, the Demon Deacons had never won an NCAA team or individual title in men's tennis. Now they have both, including 2 team titles in 2018 and now here in 2025, along with a long and impressive list of other achievements. Congratulations and welcome, Coach Tony Bresky, on being voted the North Carolina Sports Network's 2024-2025 All Sports Statewide Coach of the Year. How are you, Coach?
I'm good, thank you. I appreciate that. Holy cow, that's quite the intro. You know a lot.
Well, that's a pretty good competition too, right? I was wondering, given your 14 years here in our state, just as on a human level, before we get to sports, you and Christine got married during this time. You've had two daughters during this time. You had those two national titles during this time. You have this National Coach of the Year honor, among others, and our little trophy as well. Is it possible that the reality has exceeded whatever dream you might have had in the fall of 2011 when you arrived in Winston-Salem?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Let's give all credit to Christine, right? Like it wouldn't happen without her. So none of it was there before she got here. So maybe she's the lucky charm that's kind of help push this over the top. So no, it's been a great run and a great ride. Certainly you got to have a lot of things to go your way when you accomplish stuff like this, and we feel very fortunate and very happy that we were able to pull this off this year.
One cool part of your story as well is that you have described your parents back when you were growing up in Canada as not very competitive people, at least when it comes to sports. And yet everybody who knows you personally says your competitiveness has been central to your success, both as a tennis player back in the day and also as a coach. What do you remember about how you were wired as a young athlete playing multiple sports? And how do you think that part of your personality impacts now how you coach your guys at Wake Forest?
It's interesting how that works. Much like you said, I don't think my parents were unbelievable parents, extremely supportive, but not, when I think of tennis parents, which I deal with a lot, certainly not your standard tennis parent. For them, it was more like, okay, if I wanted to go play, I'd go play. If I didn't want to play, I didn't play. If I lost, mom's like, okay, what do you want for dinner? No worries. Everything good. Did you have fun? Well, I didn't have fun. I lost. Well, it's okay. Let's have dinner. So it's a very, very different than I think most traditional tennis parents. So I think a lot of that is a lot of it just comes from me, and I don't know. I don't know where I got it from. It's just one of those traits I guess people just get. And yeah, it certainly helped me as a player and has helped me as a coach and kind of figure out where I want to be and what we have to do to be at the top of the game.
You talk about with your guys helping them learn to overcome adversity. You have to do that in life. After leaving Wake Forest, you certainly have to do that during the more competitive matches. Give us that bigger picture. By the time you get these young folks, it's probably more evolved than it was when you were a 17-year-old young man, where, of course, you're still teaching technical aspects of tennis, but probably a lot of that is in place by the time you get them. So is coaching even more about some of these human elements than it is the techniques of tennis?
For sure. I think especially at our level, right, we're not getting a lot of development guys that need help with their technique at this point. They're not going to come to a Wake Forest. This isn't going to be a spot for guys like that. There's places in college for players like that. We're obviously getting some of the best players in the country, best players in the world, right, that already have an established track record that want to be professional tennis players. So I think a lot of the coaching, what I always say is at this level and even at a higher level, sometimes players are overcoached, but yet undertrained, right? In that the training part, the physical aspect, the fitness, the time on court, the the mental side of it, the volume that you have to put in, the matches that you have to play, that is something that we have to teach the guys. And I think a lot of times that translates to what happens in the real world post college.
I mentioned, Coach, covering this league for so long. The ACC was almost 60 years old. It's now 72. And at that point, 12 or 13 years ago, no ACC school had ever won the NCAA team title in men's tennis. And now the Atlantic Coast Conference has produced 8 of the last 12 champions, if my math is right. Your former school, UVA, has won 6 of those. You at Wake Forest, under your leadership, has now won in 2018 and now 2025. Is there any way to summarize that extreme turnaround from the first 59 years to the last dozen or so years?
Yeah, well, in those 59, I can't remember the exact year, somewhere around year 53, 54. When I was at UVA, we were undefeated one year going in the number one seeds, and we lost in the semis. So that one I don't forget. But I think honestly, for the last, I think probably I'd say about 15 years here, the ACC has been the best conference in the country as far as the top end. This year was actually, in my opinion, the best year the ACC's ever had. There was a point in time where I think we had maybe seven top 20 teams and five teams in the top 10. Honestly, I thought we could have, as a conference, even done better in the NCAA tournament. There's a couple teams that have a ton of respect for that lost a couple tight matches they could have advanced. So I think that's a tremendous advantage for us as ACC teams. As we go into the tournament, I think we're battle tested and we play each other. And you look at, obviously we had to play Stanford in the NCAA semis. Virginia lost a heartbreaker in the quarters. We could have easily had three of the four teams in the semifinals. So I think that helps us a ton as a conference, and it will moving forward as well.
I mentioned earlier that we have these multiple categories in this annual awards, and it will not surprise you that your team was a candidate for the Team of the Year honor. And of course, a lot of the coaches of those teams were candidates for the Coach of the Year honor. So you could have won either one. We don't let anybody win both. But as I know, I've heard you say already, your guys and your staff are partially responsible for whether it's a small honor like we're giving you or your National Coach of the Year honor. When you think of some of the incredible numbers for your group this year, 40 wins and one loss, I think it was. The 40 victories being an all-time Atlantic Coast Conference record. 25 of the wins coming against ranked opponents. 7 of those coming against teams in the top 5 of the national rankings. How do you summarize what made this year's national championship group so special?
We play a lot of doubleheaders, so we play. We had a big group, so we played a lot of tennis, and it's good for our guys. I mean, I think inevitably you can't probably accomplish what we did unless you have a great group, right? Like incredible coaches around us and great players, tremendous leadership from our captains and the upperclassmen, and just guys that were fully bought in. It's interesting. Tennis in itself is inherently a very selfish sport, just because the kids grow up. It's an extremely individual sport, right? Yeah. And for the best players, they grow up and everyone's telling them how good they are and how they need to get their sleep and they need to eat the right food and they need to get the right practice and they need to get the right warm up, and it's all about them, right? And so the transition to college obviously is, yes, it's still an individual sport in that they have to go play, but now you have to conform to a team atmosphere, which I love. Obviously grew up playing a lot of team sports. So now you're around a lot of people that want to see you succeed, but you can't be as selfish as you were as a kid. So I think it's just getting the right people. I mean, I think, much like you said, it's obviously very appreciative of this award and honored. At the same time, I think I always consider this like a team award and a coach's award. I'd say we have the best coaches in the country. Bakes and Vinny are unbelievable, great friends, great coaches. So it's nice I get the award, but I think it's as much mine as it is theirs. And we obviously couldn't do it if it wasn't for the boys on the team.
Quick reminder that David's entire interview with Coach Bresky can be found on our website, ncsportsnetwork.com, right here on this YouTube channel, which now has over 35,000 subscribers, along with all of our social channels. Always good to be able to promote North Carolina sports, and we do it right here every year on the Pineys, the North Carolina Sports Awards. And we're about halfway through this year's show, and coming up next, the Pineys moves forward with our North Carolina Event of the Year presented by Brentwood. That comes your way next, right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.